And I don't even care if anyone calls me a Sally, because I'm a snail and I never gonna fail. And you know what? You're gonna have to bail me out of jail.
Legendary filmmaker Rob Reiner and his wife never saw it coming. Inside their own home, the one place that's supposed to be safe and sacred, their world suddenly turned upside down. And shockingly, it wasn't because of a stranger or a break-in, it was someone close, someone they trusted. Rob, who spent decades crafting heartfelt stories about family and love, was secretly living through his own real-life heartbreak behind closed doors. His son, Nick Reiner, had been battling deep personal struggles for years, battles that had already shaken the family to its core. But no one, not even Rob himself, could have guessed how explosive things would get the night before everything completely fell apart.
That is totally falsified in every way.
Now, investigators are revisiting old comments Nick once made about his dad, statements that hit different today. Looking back, those words feel heavy, almost haunting, hinting that the tension wasn't new. The warning signs had been simmering beneath the surface for years, waiting for the moment they'd finally boil over.
Sometimes I just come out to gather my
The devastating night involving Rob Reiner and his wife, Michelle Singer Reiner, went down on December 13, 2025, a night that was supposed to be pure joy. The couple had just come from a Christmas party at Conan O'Brien's home, surrounded by Hollywood friends, laughter, and holiday cheer. But behind the bright lights and festive chatter, something felt off. Witnesses later told investigators that a fierce argument broke out between Rob and Nick, right there, in front of everyone. It wasn't some quiet family spat in a corner. It was loud, heated, and impossible to ignore. Voices clashed, emotions exploded, and the entire room froze as guests exchanged uneasy glances, realizing they were watching something no one could ever forget. As the argument got more intense, people at the party couldn't shake what they saw. Several guests later described Nick's behavior as unsettling. Something about him that night just didn't sit right.
my sick thoughts.
One person even told investigators that Nick had everyone on edge, and that phrase quickly spread once authorities started retracing the final hours before everything went down. But Rob didn't lose his cool or feed into the chaos. He stood firm, trying to keep things steady and under control.
They know the David who go on stage, who has his ways about him, but, they really want to know what's inside.
Michelle was right there beside him the whole time, standing strong, matching his calm energy even as the tension cut through the air. Together, they moved as one, determined not to let things blow up in front of everyone watching. When they finally decided to leave, it didn't look rushed or chaotic. It was quiet, almost deliberate, like two parents making a silent decision to handle something behind closed doors instead of letting it explode in public. To the people watching, it seemed like Rob and Michelle were trying their hardest to protect their family, to reel back control of a situation that was spinning out faster than anyone expected. Later that same night, things seemed completely different. Rob got on the phone with Eric Idle, and according to Eric, the vibe was totally normal, even cheerful. The two talked about creative ideas and the long-awaited Spinal Tap sequel, laughing and planning like everything was fine. Eric said there wasn't a single trace of worry or fear in Rob's voice. He sounded upbeat, driven, and full of excitement for what was coming next. In the quiet moments before that tragic night, Rob Reiner had opened up to a few trusted friends, and what he said shook them. He confessed something no parent ever wants to admit. He was scared of his own son.
The geniuses, the brilliant ones, the people, I'm referring to myself.
It wasn't said out of anger or resentment, but pure, helpless fear, the kind that comes when a parent realizes they've lost control of someone they love. Those words, whispered in confidence, would soon carry a heartbreaking weight once that night unfolded. When Rob and Michelle returned home in the early hours of December 13, 2025, something devastating happened inside their Brentwood house, something that would leave Hollywood in complete shock. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office later confirmed that the incident took place before sunrise, though the exact moment couldn't be pinned down.
We're close to making a deal that will, of course, make him the worldwide star that he deserves to be.
50 million on the line. And they were like practically just jacking me off the whole time.
By around 3 p.m., worry turned to full-blown panic. Their daughter, Rob Reiner, who lived just across the street, had been trying to reach their parents all day. When her calls kept going unanswered, she decided to go check on them, and the second she stepped inside, she knew something was horribly wrong. Without hesitation, she called for help. Paramedics and LAPD officers arrived within minutes, but what they found was heartbreaking. Both Rob and Michelle were unresponsive. Authorities immediately locked down the home and launched a full-scale investigation, treating it as a serious domestic case right from the start. And then came the first shocking detail. There were no signs of forced entry. Every door, every window, perfectly intact. Untouched, undisturbed. That could only mean one thing. Whoever was responsible didn't break in. They were already inside or had been let in willingly. Detectives canvassed the neighborhood, questioning everyone nearby, but not a single person reported hearing a thing that night. No shouts, no breaking glass, no alarms, nothing. In a quiet, upscale Brentwood community where even the smallest sound carries, that eerie silence was chilling. Investigators said it was almost like whoever moved through the home did so with calm precision, quiet, deliberate, and familiar with every inch of that house. As detectives pieced the night together, one name started standing out: Nick Reiner.
My mouth is getting a little parched because of how much I'm talking to y'all, but
And we really haven't really delved into anything deep, so.
Police records showed that shortly after the time of the incident, Nick left the Brentwood home and was spotted arriving at the Pierside Hotel in Santa Monica around 4 a.m. on December 14th. That detail sent shockwaves through the case and raised even more questions about what really happened inside the Reiner home that night. Hotel employees later told police that when Nick Reiner showed up, he looked completely calm, almost too calm. He checked in smoothly, spoke politely, and showed no signs of panic or confusion. No shaking hands, no scattered thoughts, nothing that screamed distress. It was as if nothing had happened at all. But after Nick checked out, investigators searched that same hotel room, and what they found reportedly tied him directly to the tragedy at the Brentwood home. That discovery changed everything. Suddenly, Nick's brief stay at the hotel wasn't just a random stop. It placed him right inside the investigation's most critical timeline. And just as quickly as he appeared, he was gone again, moving fast, like someone who didn't want to stay in one spot for too long. Hours later, new surveillance footage popped up showing Nick at a gas station near Exposition Boulevard and Vermont Avenue.
We're close to making a deal that will, of course, make him the worldwide star that he deserves to be.
50 million on the line, and they were like practically just jacking me off the whole time.
The cameras caught him walking in casually, grabbing a drink, paying, and walking out, cool as ever. No signs of rushing, no tension in his body language. He looked calm, in control, and almost detached, a demeanor that completely clashed with what detectives now believed had already taken place earlier that morning. By 9:15 p.m. on December 14th, police finally caught up to him near Exposition Park, just a few blocks from the University of Southern California. Patrol cars quietly surrounded the area in a tense but carefully planned operation, all unfolding right in front of stunned bystanders. When officers approached, Nick didn't fight, didn't argue, didn't even flinch. He stayed silent, followed every order, and moved exactly as they told him to. Within minutes, it was over. No shouting, no struggle, no chaos. Just the sharp, echoing sound of handcuffs snapping shut and a silence that said more than words ever could. By the end of that long, tense night, investigators weren't chasing theories anymore. They were connecting pieces that formed a dark, disturbing picture stretching across Los Angeles. A heated argument, a silent Brentwood home, no forced entry, a sudden disappearance, and a trail that zigzagged from Brentwood to Santa Monica and beyond. Everything started to make sense in the worst possible way, but one haunting question still hung in the air. What actually happened inside that house? That's when the case shifted into an even darker phase. Once detectives fully secured the Reiner home, the forensic team moved in, focused and unrelenting. Every single inch of the house was combed through, every floorboard, every surface, every faint trace that could hold a clue. Nothing was left untouched as experts worked to uncover what no neighbor or witness could explain. The most critical part came next, locking down the exact timeline. There were no cameras inside the house, no timestamps, nothing visual to rely on. That meant investigators had to lean entirely on science, body temperature, subtle physical indicators, microscopic residue. Every fragment mattered. One haunting question guided their every move. When did Rob and Michelle Reiner lose their lives? To find that answer, forensic experts focused on the body's silent markers, the stiffening of muscles and the settling of blood after the heart stops. These changes, though grim, were key to unlocking the truth. And when the results finally came in, they were chilling. The medical examiner concluded that both Rob and Michelle had passed away in the early morning hours, nearly 12 hours before anyone found them. That timing lined up perfectly with what detectives had already suspected from witness statements and Nick's movements that night. It all unfolded during the quietest hours, when the whole neighborhood slept peacefully, completely unaware that something unthinkable was happening just a few doors away. That eerie silence, the lack of any cry, crash, or commotion, became one of the most important clues in understanding how the tragedy happened without interruption. Then investigators turned to the next heartbreaking detail, the injuries themselves. Forensic specialists carefully documented multiple sharp force wounds, a clinical term for injuries caused by a sharp-edged object. These weren't distant or accidental marks. They were up close, personal, and deliberate. Each strike came from within arm's reach, face to face, direct, and repeated with chilling precision. It wasn't random or panicked. It was controlled, intentional, and devastating, the kind of violence that leaves behind not just evidence, but questions that may never truly be answered. What stunned investigators wasn't just the type of injuries, it was how many there were. The evidence revealed something far more disturbing than anyone expected. It didn't end quickly. It went on for much longer, showing an intensity that even the most experienced forensic experts found hard to process. This wasn't some moment of blind chaos. It was sustained, deliberate, and deeply personal. From a legal standpoint, repetition changes everything. Investigators don't draw emotional conclusions. They read the evidence, piece by piece. And in this case, that evidence screamed one thing loud and clear: intent. This wasn't an accident or a split-second decision. It pointed to someone who made a choice to keep going instead of stopping. Following those chilling findings, the case took a dramatic turn. Nick Reiner was formally charged with 2 counts of first-degree homicide, 1 for each parent. In California, that's the highest level of charge possible, reserved only for acts believed to be premeditated and deliberate. But prosecutors didn't stop there. They pushed it even further. Because there were multiple victims, they added special circumstances, a rare legal move that instantly elevated the case to the most serious category under California law. And that wasn't just for show. It changed everything about how the case would move forward. With that designation, the potential consequences became the harshest the justice system allows. If convicted, Nick could face life in prison without the possibility of parole, or even the most extreme penalty the court can issue, depending on how the trial unfolds. The Los Angeles District Attorney's Office made their stance crystal clear. This was the strongest charge they could possibly bring. Their official statement carried a powerful message: full confidence in both the forensic evidence and the legal foundation behind every accusation. It was a declaration that this case wasn't built on speculation or emotion. It was built on cold, undeniable proof that shook even the most hardened investigators to the core. By this stage, the case had shifted from a heartbreaking family tragedy into one of the most intense courtroom battles Los Angeles had seen in years. Investigators had everything locked in: a tight timeline, a clear sequence of events, a confirmed cause, and evidence of close, sustained contact that told a chilling story. When Nick Reiner finally appeared before a judge for the first time, the gravity of it all hit like a shockwave. The courtroom was tense, stiff air, no movement, no noise, and even the way Nick was dressed sent ripples through the crowd. This wasn't a routine hearing, it was a defining moment. On the morning of December 17, 2025, Nick Reiner was escorted into a Los Angeles courtroom for his initial hearing. Up until then, the story had only existed through headlines, official reports, and whispers in Hollywood circles, but now it had entered the cold, unforgiving light of the legal system. From that moment on, every single word spoken would be etched permanently into the record. The courtroom was locked down tight. No cameras, no live feeds, no reporters broadcasting updates from their phones. Only a small circle of attorneys, court officials, and a handful of accredited journalists were allowed inside. And those strict limits weren't a coincidence. They had been set before Nick ever stepped through those doors and stayed in place the entire time, showing just how serious and delicate this case had become. When the doors finally swung open and Nick entered, guided firmly by sheriff's deputies, the room fell to complete silence. Every step he took echoed like a drumbeat. The air was thick, heavy. Even the sound of a chair moving seemed loud. It wasn't just another legal proceeding. It was the moment the quiet mystery of Brentwood transformed into a full-scale courtroom showdown. Then people noticed what he was wearing, a harm prevention smock, the kind used in high-risk custody situations. It was unmistakable, light-colored, and impossible to miss, yet no one mentioned it. Not the judge, not the prosecutors, not even the defense attorney. The entire courtroom acted as if it wasn't there, but that silence spoke volumes. Everyone knew what it meant. They just didn't say it out loud. When the session began, the tension hit its peak. The charges were read out in a flat, clinical tone. 2 counts of first-degree homicide, one for his father and one for his mother. The words fell heavy, each line more chilling than the last. There was no emotion in the delivery, no dramatic emphasis, just the cold procedural rhythm of the law being spoken into existence. As the list of charges ended, the judge turned to Nick and asked the standard question, "Do you understand your rights?" And Nick's response was short, steady, and almost eerie in its calmness, just a quiet, "Yes, Your Honor." That was it. The only time he spoke during the entire hearing. No plea, no emotion, no visible reaction to the weight of what he was being accused of. He sat perfectly still, eyes forward, posture straight, face unreadable. It was as if he'd built a wall around himself, completely sealed off from the chaos surrounding him. The silence in the room was almost unbearable, thick with tension and disbelief. Everyone there could feel it. This wasn't just the start of a trial. This was the moment when the Reiner family tragedy became a matter of public reckoning, laid bare under the cold glare of justice. After the charges were read, the hearing shifted gears into logistics, the calm after a storm, but it was the kind of calm that felt heavy with what was coming next. Nick's defense attorney stepped up and requested a delay for the arraignment, asking for more time before entering any formal plea. The judge didn't hesitate. The request was granted, and a new court date was locked in for January 7, 2026. The prosecution didn't object. There were no heated exchanges, no back and forth, no courtroom drama, just cold procedure, moving quietly but decisively forward. Still, by the time the hearing wrapped, everyone in that room could feel it. This was just the beginning. The tension hanging in the air said more than any lawyer ever could. Then came a detail that hit observers like a jolt. The man standing right beside Nick. His attorney wasn't just any public defender or last-minute hire. It was Alan Jackson, a powerhouse name in the legal world. That name alone carries serious weight inside courtrooms across the country. Jackson is known as one of the fiercest defense attorneys out there, a man who's handled some of the most high-pressure, headline-grabbing cases imaginable. This wasn't a random choice. Jackson's track record includes defending figures like Kevin Spacey, Harvey Weinstein, and Karen Reed. That lineup alone sent a message loud and clear. This wasn't a quick defense or a stopgap plan. This was a strategy. Nick's team wasn't playing small. They were gearing up for a long, grueling fight, a battle that would dig into every shred of evidence, challenge every motion, and question every timeline. When the hearing ended, Nick was escorted out the same way he came in, silent, guarded, and stone-faced. He didn't look toward the press once. No statements were made, not by prosecutors, not by the defense. The silence inside that courtroom lingered, even as reporters whispered frantically, typing out early headlines and trying to make sense of what they had just witnessed. Within minutes, the room was nearly empty again, but outside those walls, chaos was building fast. By that same afternoon, the media had zeroed in on one burning question that refused to fade. Who was paying for this defense? Everyone in legal circles knew the reality. A double first-degree homicide case with special circumstances doesn't come cheap. These cases can drag on for years, involving teams of experts, endless pre-trial motions, and forensic specialists who don't come cheap. The cost of a defense like this could easily hit over $1 million before a single juror is even selected. And that's where the mystery got deeper. Nick Reiner didn't have a known income, no major career, no recent projects that could explain how he was funding one of the most expensive attorneys in California. That financial gap sparked instant speculation. Whispers spread fast through media circles, hinting that money tied to the Reiner estate might be footing the bill. If that turned out to be true, it added a dark twist that no one saw coming: the possibility that the very fortune built by Rob Reiner himself could now be paying to defend the son accused of ending it all. That single thought sent the story spinning in a whole new direction, and as reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, the buzz only grew louder. This case wasn't slowing down, it was just getting started, and the world was watching every move.
As the story spread, one major question started stirring up serious debate. Was it even legal to use family-linked money to fund a defense like this? People across the country were asking it, and legal experts wasted no time weighing in. They explained that the issue isn't black and white. In fact, it's incredibly complicated. In some cases, shared or inherited assets can be used to cover legal costs, but in others, doing so can set off a storm of legal disputes, objections, or even lawsuits from surviving family members. It all depends on how those assets were set up, who controls them, where the funds are held, and whether there are any restrictions tied to them. It's not just about money, it's about ownership, rights, and ethics colliding all at once. But inside the courtroom, none of that came up. The judge didn't ask where the money was coming from, and the defense team didn't offer a single word about it. Officially, the topic stayed completely off the record. Outside those walls, though, it was all anyone could talk about. The debate caught fire fast. Some people insisted that everyone, no matter what they're accused of, deserves the strongest legal defense possible. Others couldn't stomach the idea that money tied to the Reiner family legacy might be used to defend the person accused of tearing it apart. While the courtroom stayed calm and procedural, emotions everywhere else were on edge, boiling over with opinions and outrage. Even within the Reiner family, things reportedly weren't simple. Sources claimed they were deep divides. Some relatives weren't focused solely on punishment. They wanted Nick to get real mental health treatment alongside the legal process, believing the case wasn't just about a crime, but about years of pain, pressure, and unresolved issues that had finally exploded. By this point, the case had evolved far beyond law books and police reports. It had become a full-blown moral dilemma. Questions about family loyalty, justice, and responsibility were clashing in the open for everyone to see. What should justice look like in a situation like this? Could accountability and compassion exist in the same story? Still, for all the speculation and insider chatter, none of those claims were ever officially confirmed. There were no court filings, no sworn statements, nothing concrete. And through it all, the prosecution's message stayed firm, steady, and unmoved. This was a double homicide case, built on hard evidence, and they were confident they had the truth on their side.
Prosecutors stayed unwavering. They made it crystal clear that the evidence fully backed the harshest charges possible. They pointed to the brutal nature of what happened, the timeline in Nick's movements afterward, insisting it all met the legal definition for first-degree homicide, without question. And because there were multiple victims, the sentencing options under California law were brutally limited. If convicted, Nick Reiner would face only two possible outcomes: life in prison without parole, or the most extreme punishment allowed by the state. There were no reduced sentences on the table, no plea deals waiting in the wings. This was as serious as it gets. Meanwhile, behind the scenes, the case kept evolving, quietly but intensely. Detectives continued combing through evidence, attorneys on both sides fine-tuned their strategies, and fragments of information not yet public began circulating among those closest to the investigation. Everyone involved could feel it. The next phase of this case was going to be even heavier, even more explosive. And soon, one thing became obvious: Nick Reiner wasn't going to stay silent forever. In the days that followed, attention began shifting to something he had said years before any of this reached a courtroom. Words that suddenly took on a haunting new weight. Nick had once spoken publicly about his childhood, and those old comments resurfaced fast. He had admitted that he never felt truly close to his father, Rob Reiner. He described a kind of emotional distance that shaped how he saw himself within the family, saying he often felt like an outsider in his own home, standing at the edge while everyone else laughed, connected, and shared moments he could never quite reach.
By every account, Rob Reiner was known as a loving, present, and deeply involved father. He balanced a demanding Hollywood career while still making time for his family, especially his other children. He shared close relationships with them, traditions, jokes, and everyday routines that showed just how much he cared. But for Nick, those same family moments seemed to miss him somehow. The home looked picture perfect from the outside, warm, stable, and full of success. But on the inside, Nick said he felt disconnected, like the emotional warmth never fully touched him. It wasn't that Rob ignored him, far from it. Friends of the family said Rob genuinely tried to reach his son, giving him support, opportunities, and comfort whenever he could. But long hours on set, the constant pressure of fame, and the rhythm of success can sometimes create gaps no one notices until it's too late. Nick grew up surrounded by care, privilege, and access, but later admitted that care didn't always translate into connection. What he wanted wasn't more success or material comfort, it was closeness, understanding, something deeper that he felt he never quite found. That quiet loneliness, that sense of not belonging even inside his own home, stayed with him as he got older, and some say it never really let go. Instead of feeling safe or grounded at home, Nick started looking for belonging somewhere else, anywhere that offered escape instead of structure. That's when substance use crept into his life. What began as something small and experimental quickly spiraled out of control. By his mid-teens, things had gotten serious enough that he needed professional treatment just to stay afloat. His family didn't hide from it or try to sugarcoat what was happening. They faced it head-on, reaching out for help again and again, trying desperately to pull him back from something that was slowly consuming him. Nick later admitted that the substances were powerful, addictive, and destructive. They trapped him in a vicious cycle that became harder to break with every passing year. There were moments of progress that gave his family hope, brief stretches where it looked like he was finally turning things around, but every time the crash came harder. Setbacks broke that hope again and again, leaving behind exhaustion, worry, and heartbreak. Those years of struggle, pain, and constant effort would later be seen through a completely different lens once everything unraveled. Nick's life became a pattern of recovery and relapse, progress and collapse. Every time it seemed like he'd found solid ground, he slipped again, falling deeper into instability. He bounced from state to state, Maine, New Jersey, Texas, moving restlessly without structure or a real home base. These weren't fresh starts or bold career moves. They were desperate survival stretches filled with uncertainty, loneliness, and chaos. Through all of it, Rob and Michelle Reiner never gave up on their son. They stayed by his side no matter how rough it got. Friends close to the family say they never hid his struggles or tried to shift the blame.
They were open about what he was facing and their own role in trying to help. They poured everything they had into saving him: time, patience, love, money, and endless second chances. There were multiple treatment programs, phone check-ins, therapists, rehab visits, whatever it took. They kept believing that maybe this time would be the one that stuck. Their love didn't waver, even when the outcomes did. Then, at one point, Rob tried something different. He brought Nick into his world, filmmaking. In 2015, the two worked together on Being Charlie, a movie inspired directly by Nick's real-life battles with addiction. For a while, it seemed like things were finally shifting. Nick had a routine, a purpose, and a creative outlet. People close to the family said he seemed more grounded, more confident, and finally focused on something bigger than the struggle itself. For that brief moment, it looked like he had found stability, a reason to move forward and hold on. But sadly, that balance didn't last. The same demons that haunted him before eventually crept back in, and the fragile calm he'd built began to crack all over again. The same old patterns crept back in: distance, unpredictability, collapse. Each setback hit harder than the last, draining not just Nick, but everyone who loved him. What once seemed like a struggle they could manage slowly became something darker and far more dangerous. Over time, concern turned into quiet fear. The family wasn't just worried about recovery anymore, they were worried about safety. That emotional distance Nick had once spoken about, the one that stretched back to his childhood, never truly healed. It just lingered beneath the surface, feeding tension and guilt on all sides. Love got tangled with disappointment, hope mixed with heartbreak. Every effort to fix things seemed to slip through their hands. By the time that Christmas party rolled around, all those years of pressure, silence, and emotional weight were already stacked sky high. That argument wasn't random, it was the breaking point. In the aftermath of everything, the Reiner family released a joint message through Roy and Jake Reiner, and their words cut straight to the heart. They didn't talk about court dates, legal theories, or speculation. They spoke only of grief, shock, and love. They asked for privacy as they tried to process the unimaginable. Since then, they've stayed silent. No interviews, no statements, no public appearances. A private memorial followed soon after. No cameras, no reporters, no Hollywood fanfare, just quiet remembrance. Friends, collaborators, and loved ones gathered to honor Rob and Michelle in the most personal way possible, through connection, reflection, and the kind of silence that says everything words can't. Across Hollywood, tributes poured in, not only for Rob's legendary career, but for the man behind the fame. He was remembered as more than a filmmaker. He was a mentor, a leader, a gentle constant in an industry built on chaos. People spoke of his warmth, his patience, and how he made everyone around him feel safe to dream, to create, to belong. And now, the question lands in your hands. What do you think really happened inside that Brentwood home? Do you believe Nick Reiner is truly responsible, or could there be more to this story that's yet to surface? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this breakdown eye-opening, make sure to like the video and subscribe, because more shocking, deep-dive Hollywood investigations are coming soon.